John Thompson was a man of simple habits. He rose early each morning, the first light of dawn glinting off his coffee mug as he mentally prepared for another day at the local garage. His small one-bedroom house stood at the far edge of town, overlooking a patch of undeveloped land that stretched toward distant hills. To most people, it was just a modest dwelling, but to John, it was home, quiet, unassuming, and entirely his own. Years of tinkering with engines and navigating life's challenges had taught him to be thankful for what little he had. The exterior of John's house bore the wear and tear of seasons gone by. Faded paint peeled from the wooden panels, a visible testament to the years he had spent here since inheriting it from his father. Money had always been tight. Repairs were never a top priority. Yet the old place held countless memories, a rickety porch where John would often sit after work, lost in thought as the evening sky turned a gentle purple. At the garage, John's daily routine rarely changed. He would arrive early, open the big rolling doors to let in the morning air, and switch on a single fluorescent light that flickered overhead. The air inside always smelled of motor oil, grease, and worn tires, an earthy scent John found strangely comforting. His boss, who had owned the place for decades, trusted John implicitly. Customers, too, trusted him for his honesty and dedication. There was never a question he wouldn't answer, and never a car he wouldn't do his best to fix, even if it meant staying late into the night. Despite the long hours, John never complained. He took pride in his work. Each wrench he turned gave him a sense of purpose that often eluded him in other aspects of life. He lived alone, with no family nearby and few close friends. Still, he went through each day with quiet determination, never asking for more than he needed to get by. On one particularly gloomy afternoon, the sky loomed over town like an impending storm. By the time John locked up the garage and started driving home, the rain was coming down in sheets, hammering the windshield and turning the roads into slick mirrors. Thunder rumbled in the distance, the sort of low growl that makes you grip the steering wheel a little tighter. John's old truck, faded paint, creaky door hinges, and all chugged along faithfully through puddles and flooded gutters. The headlights illuminated the path just enough to keep him on course. It was during this stormy drive home that John spotted a lone figure standing on the shoulder of the road. Red hazard lights blinked through the downpour, revealing a small sedan that looked like it had seen better days. Squinting through the raindrops, John noticed a woman, shoulders hunched, trying in vain to shield herself from the storm under a thin coat. Her posture suggested both frustration and a sense of resignation. In that moment, John felt a pull at his heart. He recognized the desperation of someone who needed help. Without a second thought, he slowed his truck and carefully pulled onto the shoulder. Water splashed around his tires, and the wind whipped at his jacket as he hopped out. The chill of the rain soaked through his clothes almost instantly, but John scarcely noticed. "Do you need some help?" he called over the roar of the rain. The woman looked up, relief shining in her eyes. Her hair was plastered to her face, and her coat was thoroughly drenched. "My car won't start," she shouted back, trying to make herself heard above the torrent. John moved closer, his boots sinking into the muddy roadside. "Pop the hood," he said. "I'll take a look." A quick check confirmed his suspicion. The battery was dead. Fortunately, John kept a set of jumper cables in his truck, a habit born from years of unpredictable automotive mishaps. He retrieved them and connected the wires with practiced ease, all the while enduring the driving rain that pelted the side of his face. Within minutes, the woman's car sputtered, then roared to life. Elated, she turned off the hazard lights and rolled down the window. "Oh, thank you," she said, her voice trembling slightly. From cold or relief, it was hard to tell. "You've saved me tonight. I was worried I'd be stranded here for hours." John offered a humble shrug. "It's really nothing," he said, disconnecting the cables and stuffing them back into his truck. "I'm just glad you're all right." "Please, let me pay you," the woman insisted, fumbling inside her bag. But John shook his head, waving away the idea. "No need," he said with a small smile. "I've been in your shoes before. Sometimes you just need a little help. If you ever see someone stuck like this, pay it forward." She hesitated, clearly wanting to express her gratitude more tangibly. Yet something in John's steady gaze told her he meant what he said. That simple kindness didn't require a transaction. She introduced herself as Sarah, though at the time she offered no last name. John responded with his own name, and they exchanged a few brief words before she drove off into the storm. The whole encounter lasted barely 10 minutes, but for some reason, it lingered in John's thoughts longer than he would have expected. 2 days later, the morning started like any other. John was back at the garage, rolling under a large pickup truck on a creeper to inspect a tricky suspension issue. The phone in the office rang shrilly, shattering the relative quiet of the workshop. John's boss popped his head out of the small office, gesturing for John to come quickly. "It's for you," his boss said, his expression puzzled. "Sounds urgent." John wiped his greasy hands on a rag and took the receiver. The familiar voice of his neighbor crackled through the line, laced with a tremor of excitement and anxiety. "John, you need to come home now," the neighbor said breathlessly. "There's a helicopter parked right in front of your house." John froze. Helicopter? In his neighborhood? It made no sense. He muttered something about being right there and hung up. Hastily, he explained the situation to his boss and hopped into his old truck, the same one he'd used to help Sarah. As he drove across town, various scenarios flitted through his mind: emergencies, police raids, or maybe a medical transport that got lost. But nothing could have prepared him for what he actually found. The whirring blades of a sleek, charcoal gray helicopter disrupted the usual silence of his street. His neighbors stood on porches and lawns, watching in awe or murmuring rumors under their breath. A pair of well-dressed individuals, suits, polished shoes, stood near the aircraft, scanning the street as if waiting for John to appear. As soon as he parked, they stepped forward with disarming smiles. "Mr. Thompson," said one of them, extending a hand. "We're here on behalf of someone you helped a couple of days ago. In the rain." John's mouth went dry. Instantly, he thought of Sarah and the dead battery on the lonely roadside. Could this be related? "Sarah?" he asked, though it almost came out as a whisper. The man nodded, then offered John a crisp envelope, the edges adorned with elegant lettering. "She sends her gratitude, sir." Confusion warred with curiosity as John carefully opened the envelope. A brief note in neat handwriting read, "Thank you for your kindness. It meant more than you know. Please come with us." John stared at the words, his heart pounding. Why would Sarah send a helicopter for him? They had exchanged only a few words. He could still picture the rain dripping off her hair, the relief on her face when her car started. That memory felt inconsequential compared to this bizarre spectacle happening outside his home. "What does she want?" John asked, glancing up from the note. The second individual in a suit, a woman with poised confidence, offered a gentle smile. "It's best if we show you," she said. "There are no obligations. You're free to say no. But we do hope you'll come." John paused. He felt the weight of onlookers' stares, his curious neighbors, the swirling noise of the helicopter blades overhead. Finally, unable to tamp down his curiosity, he nodded. "All right," he said, though the single word felt momentous, as if signaling the start of an unseen chapter. The suits guided him to the helicopter. For John, the roar of the engine and the sudden liftoff felt unreal. He had never been in a helicopter before. The world below shrank quickly, the rooftops morphing into tiny squares. He caught a glimpse of his small house, the peeling paint on the roof, and the flapping tarp he used to cover a broken window frame. Soon, it was all reduced to a speck in a sea of green. They flew for only a short time before descending toward a sprawling estate on the outskirts of town, a place John had never visited. As they neared the ground, John marveled at the manicured gardens, circular fountains, and long stone pathways that led to a mansion large enough to make his hometown's main street look small by comparison. Towering columns framed the entrance, and the windows glistened in the sunlight, reflecting a level of grandeur he had only ever seen in magazines. Once they landed, John was escorted inside, each corridor revealing more opulence. Marble floors that shimmered under crystal chandeliers, polished banisters along a sweeping staircase, and ornate artwork that must have been centuries old. John felt out of place, his oil-stained jeans and work boots tracking across such pristine floors. Yet no one seemed bothered. The suits maintained respectful composure, guiding him through the labyrinth of hallways until they reached a wide set of double doors. They opened onto a sunlit room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the gardens, where a pristine lawn stretched out, flanked by rose bushes and carefully trimmed hedges. Standing by the glass was Sarah. Even in that quiet moment, her posture radiated a calm assurance that matched the grandeur of her surroundings. She wore an elegant dress, her hair neatly styled, nothing like the drenched, desperate figure John had pulled over to help. John paused, suddenly self-conscious. "Sarah," he said quietly, stepping forward. I still don't understand all this." She turned, a subtle smile warming her features. "John, I'm glad you came." He glanced around, feeling every crease in his work clothes. "Why did you send a helicopter to my house?" "You didn't have to." Sarah's voice was gentle, yet firm. "What you did for me the other night might seem small to you, but it wasn't. You stopped to help a stranger in a storm. You refused payment, asked for nothing in return. In my world, that sort of selflessness is rare." John swallowed, recalling the fleeting moment on the roadside. "It was just a jump start," he insisted. "Anyone would have done it." A flicker of something, sadness or maybe conviction, crossed Sarah's face. "No, not everyone," she said. "I was out there in the rain for a while." Several cars passed by without stopping. She took a step closer, her voice low but earnest. "I'm not just Sarah. My full name is Sarah Whitmore. My family owns, well, quite a bit of land around here and beyond. We have resources most people could only dream of. But that night, I felt vulnerable. Your kindness reminded me that, no matter our status, we all need each other sometimes." John listened, trying to reconcile the woman before him with the soaked, shivering figure he had met. He realized that night on the road was a rare moment where she might have felt utterly alone. No staff, no drivers, no protective walls. Just a stalled car and a storm. "I'm grateful," Sarah continued, her tone gentle but insistent, "and I want to repay that kindness in a way that really matters." With that, she led John to a small table near the windows, on which rested a thick envelope and a set of keys. She took both in her hands and offered them to him. "These are for you," she said. "The envelope contains a check that will more than cover your expenses for the rest of your life, if you use it wisely. The keys belong to a new car, one I chose specifically for you. I know your old truck is on its last legs." John's eyes widened in disbelief. The envelope felt heavy. He dared not open it right then for fear of what he might see. "I don't understand," he stammered, taking a half step back. "This is way too much. I just helped you start your car." Sarah shook her head, compassion coloring her features. "Maybe so. But to me, it was everything. And I believe that kind of goodness deserves recognition." For a moment, neither spoke. John's mind whirled with the enormity of her offer. Would accepting it change him? Could he handle such sudden fortune? Memories of overdue bills and nights spent worrying about the leaky roof flashed through his mind. Then he thought of a simpler life, free from financial strain, and felt a tug in his chest. Sarah continued, seeming to sense his hesitation. "There's something else," she said softly. "I'd like to offer you a position working with me. It's not just a handout, it's an opportunity. I need someone with mechanical expertise, but more than that, I need someone I can trust. Someone with heart. You'd be helping maintain the vehicles on the estate, but I also have business ventures that might benefit from your problem-solving skills. I think you'd be a great fit, if you're interested." John pressed a hand to his forehead, trying to gather himself. The idea of leaving behind the garage, his safe routine, and stepping into a world of unimaginable luxury felt daunting. It was as though he had stumbled into a fairy tale, only he wasn't sure he was the hero meant to claim the treasure. "I don't know," he managed finally. "This is all so sudden. I'm just a mechanic." "Exactly," Sarah replied, a spark of conviction in her eyes. "That's who you are, steady, reliable kind. Not everyone is like that, John, and I value it greatly. All I ask is for you to consider my offer. Take as long as you need." John clutched the envelope and keys, his pulse drumming in his ears. He felt the weight of his entire life pressing into this one decision. I need time, he breathed. Sarah offered a reassuring nod. Of course. My helicopter will take you back home whenever you're ready. The flight back felt even more surreal. John stared out the window, trying to make sense of his conversation with Sarah, the enormity of the check, and the prospect of a brand new car. By the time he landed near his house, his neighbors had scattered, though a few curtains twitched with undisguised curiosity. He trudged up his porch steps, still clutching the envelope, key ring jingling in his hand. The house seemed smaller than ever, and the sky overhead seemed less threatening than it had 2 days ago. Over the following days, John resumed his routine at the garage, though he moved through each task like a man in a dream. His boss noticed a difference in him, but John offered no explanation. Late each night, John would sit in his living room, the overhead bulb buzzing faintly as he stared at the unopened envelope. Finally, he summoned the courage to tear it open. The number on the check made his head spin. His heart hammered painfully as he imagined the life this money could buy. No more second-hand tools, no more worries about the mortgage or power bills. Alongside the check was a handwritten note. John, this is just the beginning. Your kindness changed my life that night, and I hope this helps change yours. Remember, it's your choice. You can live as you have always lived, or you can step into something new. I'll always be grateful to you, regardless of your decision. Sarah. John's vision blurred momentarily with unshed tears. Growing up, his family had never had much. To see such a sum felt like a story he'd read in a library book, never something that might happen to him. That night, he barely slept, his mind circling around memories of his father, telling him to always help those in need. You might not have riches to give, his father used to say, but you have 2 hands, and that's more than some people ever get. In the morning, John rose with an uncharacteristic energy. He phoned the number Sarah had provided. His hands trembled slightly as the phone rang, half hoping no one would pick up. But they did. He asked to speak with Sarah and told her he was ready to accept her offer, the position, the chance to do something different with his life. He still felt uneasy about taking so much money, but Sarah insisted it was a gift freely given. I have more than enough, she said. You deserve a chance to explore what you can do without the weight of worry. 3 days later, the helicopter returned, and this time John's farewell to the garage wasn't rushed or uncertain. His boss shook his hand, tears of pride shimmering in the older man's eyes. Some co-workers patted him on the back, wishing him luck. John thanked them all, promising he wouldn't forget where he came from. As the helicopter soared over the town, John felt a mixture of excitement and nostalgia. The old diner where he'd eaten countless lunches, the faded sign of the convenience store where he bought his lottery tickets, these sights grew smaller and more distant as he embarked on a new path. Back at the estate, Sarah greeted him not as a distant aristocrat, but as a friend. She showed him to his quarters in a guest house, comfortable, tastefully furnished place far larger than his old home. You'll have everything you need here, she said with a warm smile, gesturing to a set of fresh linens folded neatly on a bed. In the days that followed, John settled into a rhythm unlike any he had known. The estate's garage was a vast, fully equipped workshop, home to classic cars, modern luxury vehicles, and even a few specialty projects that Sarah's businesses required. His first day on the job, he spent hours just taking stock of the tools, state-of-the-art lifts, diagnostic machines, and an array of precision instruments. No more straining with battered wrenches or outdated equipment. With each passing week, John found a new sense of purpose. He worked alongside a small team of skilled mechanics, hired by Sarah for their expertise in vintage restoration. But it wasn't just the mechanical side. Sarah involved him in occasional strategy meetings, asking for his practical input on projects that required an everyman's perspective. He discovered he had a knack for problem solving, honed from years of diagnosing cars with odd rattles and leaks. At first, John worried about losing himself. Would he become someone unrecognizable, living amid such opulence? But Sarah's kindness reminded him constantly that his true value lay in who he was, not in what he owned. She admired his humility and conscientious nature, traits that couldn't be bought or taught. One evening, just as the sun began to set beyond the manicured hedges, John stepped out onto the balcony of the guest house. The horizon glowed with bands of orange and pink, and the estate's garden stretched out like a living painting, each blossom part of a larger tapestry of color. He thought back to his old life, the peeling paint on his house, the worn engine hoist at the garage, the hours he used to worry about money, and realized how extraordinary his journey had been. A simple act of kindness had set it all in motion. Though life had changed drastically, John felt a renewed sense of gratitude. He phoned his former boss and a few customers he considered friends, letting them know he hadn't forgotten them. Some asked if he planned on returning. "I'm not sure," he answered honestly. "But for now, I'm where I'm meant to be." Inside, he could hear laughter from the main house, where a few employees were wrapping up the day's tasks. He inhaled the cool evening air, savoring the subtle fragrance of roses in bloom. In that moment, he understood something his father had often tried to teach him. Kindness is a ripple, and you never know how far it will travel. Sarah's gratitude was more than a lavish reward. It was a reminder of how life can shift in the blink of an eye. You can spend years stuck in a routine, convinced you're invisible to the rest of the world, and then one day, a small decision to help someone sets into motion events beyond your wildest dreams. Standing on that balcony, watching the sky fade into twilight, John felt both humble and hopeful. He had a new job that respected his skills, a financial safety net that freed him from fear, and a friend who had shown him a side of life he never thought he'd see. Yet, more than anything, he realized that the true wealth lay in the act itself. Stopping to help a stranger in the rain, expecting nothing in return, discovering that a single spark of compassion can illuminate the darkest corners of fate. Love this story? Show your support by tapping that like button and subscribing to Mystic Tales for more captivating narratives. Let us know how this story made you feel with a single word in the comments below. After all, sometimes it only takes one word or one kind act to change a life forever.